Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' Myofascial Release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my Myofascial Release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I'm joined here by a very special guest. She has been a physical therapist since 2000. She graduated as the valedictorian of her class. She found Myofascial Release in 2002. She competed as a professional bodybuilder from 2003 to 2017, and she started her own Myofascial Release practice in 2016. It's my honor to introduce Krissy Chin. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, inviting me. I'm super excited to be here, and I love what you're doing and bring more awareness into the amazing work that we both have, thankfully have found, so super thankful for what you're doing.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you to John who started this all, and that's what we're able to connect on. Now, before you found John's work, can I ask, how did you know you wanted to be a physical therapist?
I knew I wanted to be a physical therapist starting back in high school. I was a 3 varsity athlete, and we had an athletic trainer and a team that worked with all our varsity athletes throughout our season. And I fell in love with the idea of working with athletes and athletic training. So I had approached my athletic trainer, who I became close with, of course. And I was like, that's it. I want to be an athletic trainer, just like you. And then he was like, Krissy, and he goes, to be honest, as a female, there might not be as many opportunities as you would like. So maybe think about physical therapy. So I was like, oh, okay. So I did some volunteer work in different settings back in high school in different physical therapy settings. And I'm like, I love this. I get to work with people and help them get better no matter what they've been through, whether it be a stroke or orthopedic injury or a car accident. So starting back in high school, I knew that was going to be my path to be a physical therapist.
It sounds like you knew it to begin with and you never had any doubts about it. Were there any challenges that came through that process?
Not challenges in pursuing the degree. I think I had life challenges. When I was in high school, I found out my mom had cancer. So I think going away to physical therapy school, because I went to University of Maryland to start, I think that was challenging because I was not home with her while she was battling the cancer. So I think, of course, that was a big challenge. And then when she passed, it was another whoa, just to lose a parent was, especially someone so close, like my mom and I and my dad and I were tight, and they were the most amazing, loving parents. So losing her was hard, and then when I was in grad school, going for my master's in physical therapy, my dad had passed. So I think that was what was challenging, was having such big losses, but it never stopped me. In grad school, I took one day off for my dad's funeral and I was right back to class, because I was determined. I knew what my goal was. And there was nothing that was gonna deter me, even though my professors were wonderful, take your time, take your time. No, I'm good. I'm back,
That's amazing. And, thank you for sharing that. I don't know that loss. Thankfully, at this point in my life, I could only imagine that it would be very emotionally draining. How were you able to process that while maintaining the rigors of physical therapy school?
After losing both my parents, and it made my parents so happy knowing I was going to be a physical therapist, that I was going to help people. And I remember one of the nurses caring for my dad when I was in grad school, when I would get back from school, she'd be like, Krissy, when your dad talks about you, he's just so proud and happy that you're pursuing to be a physical therapist. So I think knowing that my parents were so proud that I was going to a profession to help others, that motivated me. And then after I lost them both, I was just I know how much it meant to them. So I was like, okay, that's it. I'm going to focus on my studies. Nothing's going to deter me from focus on my studies. I'll graduate, but I made a promise. I go, Mom, Dad, I promise I will graduate top of my class.
And did you fulfill that promise?
Yes. Yeah. So I did graduate valedictorian, and at graduation, the dean had shared I graduated with the highest GPA ever in the school's history of any major.
That is amazing, and I can't speak for your parents, but I would imagine if they were here, they would say they were very proud of you. So, I know that I've been through PT school, and it is very challenging. I was nowhere near the top of my class, so to hear that you did that, kudos to you. I don't think that we love our parents enough, and now as I'm thinking of my parents, I know that they have given me opportunities that I wouldn't have otherwise had for myself, and I don't think anyone ever does it alone.
Mhm.
So, while they're here, definitely love up on them, but if you could hypothetically speak to them right now, what's one thing that you would like to say to them?
If they were here and I could speak to them again, to just express my love and gratitude for them.
Yeah.
Like, everything they sacrificed, everything they did to give the life that they gave my brother and I, like, they were so amazing. So, just so grateful, like, my heart is just so full of love because I'm not the person I am today if it wasn't for them. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for them. So, just all the love and gratitude that I have for them as who they are as people, because they were amazing people, always helping others and always going out of their way to help others, but just the impact they had on me and my life now.
I love that, and I think we all can look at our parents and say, "Hey, they probably made sacrifices that I don't even know, and to
Yeah.
they did things out of love." And I would imagine having a kid is all about that. So
Mhm.
I'm sure that they heard that, and thank you for saying that out loud. Now, you graduated top of the class, made your parents super proud, and then you found myofascial release. Where were you at in life where you found that, and how did you come into this work?
So I graduated PT school in 2000 and then I decided to move. I was born and raised in New York and I decided that I needed to change. So I moved myself to Florida and I got a job, of course. I was working at a rehab hospital first, and then I was offered to run a physical therapy department by 3 physicians I got to know. So I was running their PT department, and I was always into learning. Like, I always wanted to be better, know more. So one of the physical therapy assistants that worked in our department was like, "Oh, I'm going, to a conference." I'm like, "Oh, what are you going for? What is it about?" And she goes, "I'm going to a John Barnes Myofascial Release conference." And I go, "Who is that and what is that?" Because I had never heard of John's name prior to that or of Myofascial Release. And she's like, "Oh, I've been taking the seminars. They're so great. And I've been applying with our patients. And, the treatment response has been really favorable." And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to go then." So 3 of us from the PT department decided to go together. And I just remember sitting in on the conference and I was like, this makes so much more sense than when I was taught in physical therapy school. I'm like, yeah, this is what I need to do. It was like light bulb, bing, bing, like jackpot. I was so excited. And then when I felt the work, because, we experienced the work during the conferences, which is great. We just don't learn about it. Like we're treating each other. I was like, this feels so good. It just felt so right. I'm like, oh, this is what I'm going to be doing.
Okay, I don't know because my experience was very different. I think I'll come across experienced therapists who will say, "Yeah, I came to one of his seminars and I was immediately hooked." Whereas for me, I questioned it more than anything. I was like, "Is this real? Someone just unwound on stage and it looked like an exorcism. Like this is not real?" And I remember asking him so many questions at the beginning, just like, if you're saying this is right, then you're saying healthcare is wrong. Is that correct? And he'd say, yes. Yeah. I had all these things where I'm like, oh my gosh, like I didn't think he was lying, but I didn't know if I could give away all the things that I had invested into, like my education, like postdoc training, like fellowship training. And one, I don't think that you give it up. Something that John says is myofascial release is not asking you to give anything up, but by learning it, it will become better? And I'll say that my experience, it was so different because I had never learned anything where it's like, feel what comes up. It was always, hey, this is the textbook thing. You're doing these special tests to figure out what's hurt. And then you come up with the treatment program for that. And I definitely think that physical therapy is like the Stone Ages. It's like we learn things today that they taught in the 60s. There hasn't really been much progress. And I still can't believe it's like, oh, ice packs, heat packs, ultrasound, electrical stimulation. Like none of this has any long-term benefits, but we still learn about that stuff today.
I know.
And so it's interesting though to hear that you said, "Oh, the light bulbs went off and you're immediately hooked." And hey, maybe you're just a faster learner than I am. You know, you're a valedictorian. I was barely graduating at the bottom of my class. You know, when I questioned things, I was like, I don't know. I didn't get this. And so I had taken 2 vacation series. So that was 6 courses total. And
Mhm.
there was something that was like, there's something about this, but I don't know what it is. And everyone's on their own journey, right? And so for me, what I've learned in my life is the bigger the doubt, the bigger the awakening. And
Mm.
so even though I was doubting the validity and I was very skeptical, John was very patient and he answered all my questions. And he always nudged me in towards myofascial release, but I was so resistant. And so, one, John, if you're listening to this, thank you for being patient because now I told him, I was like, it's good that I'm skeptical because if this is real and if this is the truth, then I will become your biggest fan versus someone who might say, oh, I just saw this and I joined it, right? Versus for me, I was like, because I'm having to overcome my own belief systems. And the cool thing about this work is something that he mentions is you can only take someone as far as you have gone.
Yes.
I have never heard that in any other CEU course. And so by overcoming my own doubts, my own skepticism, now when somebody else is doubtful and skeptical about it, I can walk alongside them as I nudge them to this work. How have your experiences with myofascial release allowed you to be a better therapist or a better person in your own personal life?
I thank John all the time, for what he's taught me and everything he's given me over these past now 23 years, because the work has completely changed my life. But like you said, something that John shares with us, you can only take your clients as far as you've gone yourself. And I've had so much healing with this work, emotional healing, physical healing, that now that, when I look at myself now from where I was to where I am now, now I'm living in channel 3 like John teaches us, like every day I'm happy, joyful, like I'm living in this tremendous love and light and it just like permeates into all areas of my life. Where before John's work, I didn't have that. I was so lost and I didn't even realize how much hurt and grief and sadness and frustration was so buried because when my parents passed, I didn't know John's work yet because they passed in the 90s. So, with all the healing I've received with the myofascial work, and I remember this, you'll love this story because it was like my second MFR seminar, And Donna remembers when she's like, you had this like sparkly bikini, and it had to like second class, right? And John was teaching. It was in Vegas, and John has, how John asked, does someone want to volunteer? And knowing nothing about the work really yet, I was like, oh me. And then I remember just going on stage, and I don't even remember what technique it was. And then I felt like this, like a volcano was going to explode from deep, deep down, like in my lower abdominal pelvic area. I just felt like this volcano was going to explode. And I just remember, I just started crying. Like, I'm not just like, hoo hoo. I mean, like bawling, like crying tears. Like, I could not even stop, like, all the tears. But, it felt so freeing that I didn't even want it to stop. I was like, oh, it just felt like it needed to happen, and then John shares with us, you're not supposed to think about things, kind of that can thwart the healing response. But I didn't even know that back then, but I just didn't stop it. I just kind of felt into whatever it was. And I remember going back to the hotel room at lunch and I was like, gosh, I felt so much lighter. But I was like, that's probably all that I had to stuff down, caring for mom, caring for dad, and always have to be the strong one in our family. So much had been stuffed down. And I didn't realize how much had been stuffed down until that first big cry. But of course, I've had more. healing over the years with, the loss of my mom and dad and stuff. But I remember that I was like, yeah, me, I want to volunteer. Little did I know what I was going to experience. So I'm just so grateful to John, so grateful for this work because I'm living in Channel 3 and like I am honestly enjoying my life so much every day, and I'm just so grateful, because now I can like help others if they're open to enjoy their life and to feel good and to live in this beautiful love and light. We're on earth here at this time, for all of us we're meant to enjoy our lives, and to make the most of every moment with everyone in our life.
100%. I couldn't have stated that better. Now, I think we all go through our own stories and experiences. And
Mhm.
I love hearing what was that moment that got you to ultimately accept myofascial release. And, you hopped up on stage and had your whole experience. I think my turning point, or at least the thing that kept scratching an itch, was that during unwinding, I think at the end of the seminar, they'll play this opera music, and John says, everyone's lost someone or something in their life, and you don't have that time to grieve. And I remember I was on the floor, and my grandmother had passed maybe the year prior. And, I was a really motivated person. And so I was trying to do really good at my job. And I thought, hey, this is going to be important. And again, you just kind of go into this busy mode and you don't feel the feelings. And so when John held the space for all of us to feel that, I remember my jaw was quivering. And then I started to cry just a little bit. And I was like, okay, there's something here. I don't know what this is, but it could be the best thing since sliced bread, or it could be a sham. I don't know. And through going through multiple seminar series, getting to
Mhm.
know not only John, but the people who do this work authentically, it is the real deal.
Mhm.
But for anyone who's skeptical and questioning it, I would just allow you to be there. I was once there, and no one could tell me anything that would have convinced me that this was the best thing. It was something that I had to go through myself. And
Mhm.
yeah, sometimes you have to make mistakes yourself to learn from them, and that's just part of the process. Now, something that you've mentioned is Channel 3. And for the listeners that are maybe new to this podcast, John talks about two channels, Channel 3 and Channel 5. And you can think of it as Channel 3 being more like your right side of your brain, like it's more intuitive, creative, loving, and that's where the love is thought to be. And Channel 5 can be thought of as your left brain. It's more logical, linear, impulsive, and this is where fear is thought to be, at least the way John teaches it. And so what he challenges us to do is to lead from Channel 3, or your heart. And that will then allow the Channel 5 to be used in the way that it's supposed to be used, as a
Mhm.
support for Channel 3. But what tends to happen, especially as we grow up into adults, is that Channel 5 takes over. And then you watch something like the news where it's all fear-based, and then that's what molds your world. Whereas if you want to live like Krissy, if you start with Channel 3, that will be the highlight of which everything else falls into place in. Now, you said that there wasn't always a time where you had learned this. So, how are you able to make that shift? Because I think for myself, I am still going through this process where it's like sometimes I'll catch myself leading from Channel 5 more, and then I'll have to quiet myself and be like, okay, what is God kind of guiding me towards? So, what was that shift in mindset for you?
I think that when I started delving deeper into the work and being more consistent, well, I solely practice John's work. So solely practicing his work, then always getting treated, and then being present at so many seminars. When you're delved so deep into, you're always going to be in Channel 3. You don't have the time to go back to Channel 5. And it's so much easier to live in love and light and so much more fun that it's like Channel 5. So I think with delving deeper into the work and all the healing that I've received with the work, and for me too, and I shared with a client the other day, who's a believer and came in and he shared something. It was really neat. He was a brand new client from Texas, from your state. And he's like, I was walking, I saw your sign, and then God was telling me when you came up, God was telling me, yep, she's calibrating. She's like right there. And he goes, and I'm not just talking about you as a practitioner, but in all areas of your life. And I go, I love that you shared that with me. Just meeting me today and treating you. And I go, this work, John's work has brought me closer to God because I find that the more we clear out of our static, our noise and stuff, we're able to receive more,
Mhm.
you know? So with all the work and healing I've had with the myofascial work, it's definitely brought me closer to God. Like now I hear so much more clearly and I'm like, oh, gotcha. I know what I got to do. I know what I have to say, know who I have to call, you know? So that would be my recommendation for people. If you're still like teetering, channel 5, channel 3, get treated more because, a lot of people I don't think get treated as often as they should, and the more we clear out of ourselves, we're better for ourselves, but we're better for everyone in our life, everyone in our personal life, everyone that we treat. Because imagine if we have so much, we have so much in ourselves, and we're fearful, we're worried, we have this, we have that, we have pain, and we're trying to connect into someone, it's going to be really limited, you know? So I would highly recommend for people to receive the work, as John says. John teaches everything he says. I'm like, you're right, John. Everything you've said is right, He's like, if you love yourself enough, find yourself a skilled therapist to get treated by, but then also treat all your loved ones, because when you love someone, you want them to be in channel 3 with you and you want them to feel that joy and their love on a daily basis. So of course, I treat Troy, who you've met, I treat London, my daughter London, I treat our dogs, and then I treat everyone here. And they're like, oh, Krissy, do you treat horses? Yes, I treat horses. Oh, do you want to treat my dog? Yes. I'm like, I want to treat everyone with this work.
Yeah, it is something that becomes a great part of your life once you accept it.
Yes.
And the reason I mention that is because I know when I was working at my first job, and it was an insurance-based physical therapy clinic, and they wanted you treating multiple patients an hour, I would get burnt out and I would dread Mondays.
Mhm.
And then once I started my own myofascial release practice, Mondays are one of my favorite days. Like when you get to do this work, I've never had a job where I feel better doing the job. So it's a practice of, yes, being centered and present. And when you're in that space, you're just the best version of yourself versus when you're like anxious about something or anxiety is creeping up or you're overthinking and you're just in your head in channel 5. You're right, that's not how you wanna live life, and when you can be in channel 3, everything slows down, and I think sometimes we want things to happen in a way that we want, and something that you've described is sometimes it's when God sees it for you. Now, something that you've mentioned is being able to hear God's voice. For those of us who have never had that experience, what does that sound like exactly?
Yeah, he communicate like God communicates to me in different ways, sometimes through visions, I'll get a vision. Sometimes it's like someone speaking to me and then, the voice is not so audible, but the message is coming through, and I know I'm like, "Oh, that's definitely from God. So he does it different ways, and sometimes it's through people. So sometimes, as God works in us, through us, and sometimes through other people. So sometimes he presents someone into my life, try to tell me something too. So he communicates in so many different ways, and it's so neat because I didn't grow up knowing God. Like I did not accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior until like late in my 20s, early 30s you know? So now that I have found him and see how much easier and better it is to live life with him, I'm like, I'm so grateful. Now it's even better that not only when I first accepted him, but now with John's work and hearing so much that I have in my communication and my relationship so much stronger with God, it's like, this is incredible. Like, this is amazing. Like, I wish I had this when I was way younger, but I'm so thankful I have it now. But, I'm sharing it with like London, who's my daughter. I go, you're so lucky. I go, not only have you known John's work since birth, but you also have heard God's word, like I was reading to you when you were in my womb. So you've have both of these crucial things have made me who I am today, at such an early age. And it's such a blessing because when I see how she's thriving and flourishing and she's living in this love and light, not so linear. So I'm not so hard on her about the linear grades, even though, knowing, back then before John's work, I was like, if I get a 98, I'm mad, I'm like, I had to breathe and sob a bit. I'd be like, all right, she's this creative, intuitive, beautiful being. And that's what I want for her, even though, like John says, our schooling, puts it out channel 5, linear, logical, So it's been a really neat balance and shift for me raising her in this work, knowing that how I used to be, before John's work, where I was like this perfectionist. And now you remember John teaches us strive for excellence, not perfection, So I'm like, gosh, if I had John way back, I would have done even better than him. So I'm just so grateful, when I reflect back.
For sure. I think a lot of Asians, we have this crutch of perfectionism.
Yes.
And I mean, you embody the Asian that every parent wishes they had, valedictorian, top of their class, always getting the hundreds. And for me, I kind of identify with being a lazy Asian. Like, I still have the Asian standards, but you're talking about, like, I would get mad if I got a 98 because you wanted 100. Whereas for me, if I made 100 on the first exam, I knew that if I got an 80 on the second exam, that would average out to a 90. So I was always trying to hit that 90. And it was like so granular. I was like, I could get a 79 because an 89.5 rounds up. Sometimes now when I think, I'm like, dude, if you'd have just channeled all that into like effort and energy, you could do much better. But I was like, I just want to know this one line. But again, I was still shooting for the 90s. And there is a level of perfectionism where when I have been introduced and embodied John's work, it's like none of that stuff matters. Like no one cares about what your GPA was in college or in PT school. What people really care about is, can you help them when someone is suffering in pain, especially when it's chronic for years at a time and they come to you? It's like, can you see me? Are you listening? Because I'm going to these professionals who have these degrees and these accolades, but I just feel like no one hears me. And that's where John's work comes into play. It's like, can you sit in the mud with someone? Can you be there for them and just listening? Because if I just strip myofascial release down to its bare components, all you're doing is feeling with them into the depth barrier, nudging it into the depth barrier, and just waiting. It doesn't have to be anything else other than that. Now, that being said, having a background in physical therapy helps me stay grounded to this work. And I'll say that early on, when I knew that John was a physical therapist, Rob was a physical therapist, I was like, okay, there's these physical therapists here. There's something here. Helped me kind of take that step. Now, myofascial release was kind of a stepping stone for me to find God. And I find that a lot of myofascial release therapists find that alignment because it does match a lot of God's teachings or the teachings of Jesus Christ in that, hey, when you are embodying the fruit of the Spirit, one of the fruits is joy. So when you find that, you kind of pursue that and not to live in fear. And so when John's teaching that, there's that truth. And then I feel that. And as long as I use that as my compass, that's where I tend to find myself in the best situations. It's when I try to be my own steward in like trying to be the guide for my own life, and it's got to be this way because I see it this way. That's where I find myself in trouble. Something that you have described is your daughter, London. And I think before we started this podcast, you had mentioned that you were a pro bodybuilder. You had gotten invited to some of these really amazing events. Like you have to compete at the highest level. And then you found God's plan, or you actually called her divine blessing. Can you go back to that moment in life and elaborate on what it meant to have a divine blessing?
Without a doubt, it's divine blessing just because at the time I was like at the peak of my career. Like I had just placed top 10 in the world at the Arnold. And then I went to my next show and I got second. So I just like missed first place by that much, So the next show, I was like, all right, this is going to be it. And my coach, who's like this, like he's family to us now. That's London's Uncle Kim. He's like, all right, this is going to be the show. We're going to win this show, And I go, that's it. We're going to win the show, right? And then I remember, and I shared this story on a recent interview. I was interviewed talking about my past Olympia showings and working with my coach and stuff. And I had shared, I was like 4 weeks out from the show that I was like set on going to win. And I met with my coach and he looks at me, he goes, Krissy, have you been cheating on your diet? I go, cheating? I do not cheat on my diet. And then he's like, well, you have this little pooch. And I go, pooch? So I looked down and I had my six pack, my ripped six pack. And then at the base was like this little bloat. And I go, whoa, what is that? So I go, I don't know what that is. So like, this is hilarious. So I went for colonics. I'm like, maybe I'm backed up. Maybe I used to cleanse out my body. So I gone for colonics and everything. And then lo and behold, we found out we were pregnant. And to get pregnant when your body fat is so low, like our body fat to compete at that level of the sport is so low. Plus, I was on birth control pills. So the combination of those two, it's very highly unlikely. It has to be a miracle, or as I call my divine blessing of God. Like, I think the Lord was like, Krissy, I've allowed you this time doing what you wanted to do, but I have other plans for your life, and that was London. He was like, boom. So we found out we were pregnant and that I actually competed twice pregnant, not knowing, it was London. And that's totally changed like the course of my life. But I think that was God's way to saying, well, we're going to deviate a little bit from what you want, Krissy, and we're going to go this way.
Yeah, that is very comforting for me to hear. I recently got married to my wife, Yvette, and now we are on kind of this journey where we're talking about the idea of kids. And, so we're trying and it's not happening yet. And sometimes we'll get frustrated. And so for anyone going along this process, just know you're not alone. And there's this one Netflix special by Andrew Schultz. He's a stand-up comedian and he has this bit on life and his pregnancy journey with his wife. And that gave me some laughter in this field that can often feel very depressing. And I think when I hear your story, I just have to trust in God because that is the ultimate steward. And when he says that we're ready, then I trust that we'll be blessed to have a child. And I think for you, because you're saying all of these things will contribute to the lowest likelihood of being pregnant. And here is my divine blessing. And here is me hearing God saying, hey, I know you want this one thing, but I'm actually going to steer you in this direction. Now, when you first heard that news, how did you take it?
Well, Troy and I were in shock first. Yeah. Literally, we were laying there side by side and did not say anything for like 40 minutes. We're like, pregnant? Baby? And then we not only did it without talk 40 minutes, it was like, what? Like, there's no way. There's no way. So we even had to buy multiple tests to be like, there's no way, So we bought different kinds and we're reading one line, two lines. Then we're like, no, let's get the one that say pregnant, not pregnant. And then we're like, oh, it is, So we were just in shock. Like I said, we didn't even say a word, for like 40 minutes, just laying there like. But I think I was even more of a shock when I went to my first appointment. And I'm thinking, okay, it's probably like this little tiny little seedling, the size of this, And the nurse was doing the ultrasound. And I just remember looking at the screen and my eyes were like, and I see this big baby. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how far along am I? She's like, you're like 15 weeks. Like, how did you not know you were pregnant, And I'm like, well, I compete in bodybuilding. I've been competing. I have a ripped six pack. I wasn't feeling it. I had no symptoms or anything, And she's like, well, you're 15 weeks, like second trimester. And I'm like, we're having a baby. We're still like, what are we going to do? But God always works it out, like you said, when you have faith and it's in his timing, his plans are always better for us than even our own plans, And I can testaments to that, like, oh God, your plans are way better. And I'm so thankful that I am like, yep, whatever you say, I will do. And like, I'm right here with you, It makes life so much easier too.
Can you
Yeah.
give us an example of when you thought your plan was what you wanted and then his plan ultimately was the best thing?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing. I was like, "Oh, top 10 in the world. I'm gonna win my next show. I'll be at an Olympia stage again. I'll get more sponsors, be in more magazines." That was my vision,
Mhm.
my plan, until God's like, "Baby." I was like, "Oh, okay." Total change in plans, but thankfully, even though my relationship wasn't the same as it is now with the Lord, I was like, okay. And I'm so glad that I did because London is like the most beautiful blessing ever. Like, I just love her so much. Like, I can't even like express how much I love this child. And just seeing her and watching her grow in this, she's living and loving and growing in Channel 3 and John's work. She loves John. She argues that she loves him more than me. So we argue about that. She loves the work. She, since age 5, she said she wants to be a myofascial release practitioner, PT, just like mommy. So she wants to work with me. So it's a testament saying, "Oh yeah, God, your plan is way better," because I was looking at a more superficial exterior kind of accomplishment achievements.
Yeah.
The Lord was like, "No, I'm going to bless you with something that's going to change the course of your life, and it's going to heal you. It's going to show you how to love. The child's going to teach you, show you things. And that's what children are. Children are just blessings. And I get so excited knowing that you want to have children because it makes me so excited. I just love babies so much. But they do. They're here, like they're gifts from God, and they bless us in so many ways. They show us things, they teach us things, and they just bring so much love and blessing into our lives. So I'm excited for you.
Yeah, this will be a journey. I pray that one day I'll be blessed to join this parenthood. What do you think is the biggest lesson you've learned from London?
She teaches me a lot. A lot of times too, like I'll say something to them, she'll be like, "What would Jesus say? What would Jesus do, mom?" So it's so neat to get reminded for my own child, just only 12. But when I watch her and how loving she is and how nurturing she is, it reminds me, yeah, we're meant to love others to that degree.
Yeah.
Even people that we might not know so well, because they might be going through a trial or something in their life, and they might not just need a smile or a hug or some comforting words. So whenever I watch her and how she is, reminds me, yeah, we're meant here to connect with others and to love others the way Jesus loves us.
Absolutely. And I think something that I've learned in life, one, through John's work, and two, through the Bible, is the things that slow you down are actually the things that are the blessings. Because sometimes, especially for me, at a stage in my life where I'm building out my own myofascial release clinic and practice, and there's a lot of stress and it's very busy. It's like I gotta build this construction for this wall, I gotta set everything up. And I just want to give a shout out to my wife, Yvette. She's been helping me every step of the way. And I'll just get busier and busier. And then something will happen that will slow me down. And I'll think it's kind of a nuisance because it's stopping me from doing the thing that I have set my mind on doing. But that thing that slows you down is actually telling you, hey, you need to slow down. And if it's something like a blessing like you, where it's London and she's slowing you down and showing you what matters in life, or for me, I tore my ACL and that slowed me down and helped me refocus on what is important in life. It's
Mhm.
those things that keep you still, that allow you to hear God. John would call that your intuition, right? He'll say, go out into nature, quiet yourself, and something that catches your eye, let it teach you. And you can ask it. And it's not going to like talk to you, but it's going to allow your subconscious or your intuition to finally have that space to give you the message. And whether that's through an image, whether that's through a premonition or a feeling, that I think is what you had mentioned earlier as God speaking to you, whether it's through people or through these different synchronicities or experiences. Now, I love hearing your story, and it sounds like you've naturally gone through different chapters very easily. There are challenges along the way, but it doesn't sound like there is much resistance. Like, did you had to grieve that you had to give up this bodybuilding, or you just like, okay, here's my next thing. I'm ready to tackle that. Like, it just seems like you just go from one phase to the next very seamlessly. Is that correct? Or am I totally wrong on this?
Yeah. So I didn't know if I was going to compete again after I had London, right? So I took, 18 months off of not competing, but then after 18 months of having London, I did go back and compete again, a competitive side. But I just need to see how I can push my body back after pregnancy. So I did go back to competing, but after I did my last competition in 2017, I realized the time that it would take me to stay competing would take time away from what I love the most is my family and my practice. So I finally have come to the next chapter in my life. And I shared this recently too with John. I had shared it with, and then a client recently. I said, for the first time in my life, I can say I'm exactly where I need to be, doing exactly what I need to be doing with like no regrets, no looking back, like right here, you know? So I'm so grateful to be able to say that, and know that, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be and doing what I'm supposed to be doing, without any hesitation on it. Like there's no doubt in my mind, like, yep, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Yep, right here, Krissy. So I'm just so grateful to be able to know that I'm here, and knowing that I have years ahead of me to grow on this, where I am now.
That's huge. The feeling of being where exactly you need to be. I don't feel like a lot of people can even share that experience. I think a lot of us in myofascial release do because we're pursuing something that we love and that we're passionate about. And it kind of allows us, if we follow the principles, to get onto our path and our purpose.
Yes.
And I think you described it perfectly. You were in this competitive bodybuilding atmosphere, and that was a lot of external validation. And then you got the divine blessing, who is London. And that kind of helped navigate your life in what's really important. And then using those principles and combining that, starting your own myofascial release practice, and then having this moment of saying, man, I'm exactly where I need to be and where I want to be. And I can say that for me right now, even though sometimes it's stressful setting up a clinic space and all this other stuff. But sometimes I'll meet individuals where, life is just doing something and it's just a means to an end. And there's not that light in their eyes. It's kind of like they gave up on their dreams because, hey, they got fed this message that money was important. So that's what you pursued. And something that John will mention is, if you find that this work is for you, then don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it or that it's wrong, and follow that intuition, because he will work with people who have millions at their disposal, and they can buy fancy yachts or boats or houses or cars, but he feels this deep sadness within them. And it's because they have fallen prey to the world's idea of success. And what you find once you get there is it's very empty versus if you're here and you're following, whether it's John's principles or if you're Christian and God's and Jesus' principles, that stuff is all external validation. But if you can find the internal validation, hey, why am I doing this? And it's for me because I value family and this is bringing me closer with family, then that will feel much more enriching in life. And sometimes it's hard to see because we grow up in this environment that teaches us, hey, this is what is important. It's to have the money, the cars, or whatever, versus what you have already instilled in your daughter London is, hey, following what you're passionate about, connecting with others, being able to be a human being, connecting with another human being. There is something very special about that is hard to put into words. For you now, at the stage of life where you're at, if you could give that younger version of yourself, let's say right before you had London, you're a very different person with different drivers, what would you say to that version of yourself?
There's so much more to life and so many more blessings if you just look and open, and kind of like when John tells us, don't narrow vision, but kind of look globally. I think I was so narrowly focused that I would tell my younger self, no, you got to widen your focus and kind of look outside of your lane, because if you do, there's so many more blessings and opportunities and what is really going to change your life and to show you your purpose in life.
I love that. I think when we get to pursue our purpose, it just helps with making decisions because you either go towards your purpose or away from it. And once you feel your purpose and you feel like this is where I'm supposed to be and where I want to be, those decisions get really easy. Versus if you don't know what it is, then you're weighing the pros and cons of everything. And I love the advice that you shared for yourself. Before Channel 5 and Channel 3, what I heard is John used to teach the eagle and the hawk. And the hawk has that laser focus. They pin down on one thing and they go after that one thing. Whereas John teaches us to be more like the eagle, where it'll see everything that's around and it'll notice little disturbances in the bushes to know that there's an animal there, something there for food. And so he challenges us to be like the eagle, but that has since morphed into Channel 5 and Channel 3. Channel 5 being the hawk, the narrow focus, and then Channel 3 being more like the eagle, the broad focus. Now, I want to thank you for being open and honest on this podcast. Your energy is very vibrant. I can see very much you're in Channel 3. Is there any last thing you would like to share with my audience?
I can talk forever just because I just am so grateful for, the myofascial work and for John, but to anyone out there that may be listening, just be open, you know, you might have reservations or you might have fears. Just be open to receiving this work. I tell people, especially my newer clients, I go, I explain the work and then I go, just be open to receiving. I go, if you're open to receiving this work can be so powerful and so profound, So give yourself that chance, that opportunity, to experience it and to feel it fully, because it can have such a profound effect on not only how you feel, but on your whole life. So that's why, like, I've made it a goal. Like, my goal is to share this work with as many people as I can because I want everyone to find their purpose, to find joy, to find happiness, to find love, And with John's work and the principles he's taught us, they are life principles, you know. And so I just want like everyone to be able to experience that, especially when I see people hurting or sad or you see people that are lost, I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm going to work as much as I can, possibly talk about John's work as much as I can, share as much love and light as I can, because when you're able to reach the point that you have it and you're experiencing and you're living in it, you just want everyone to be able to experience that and feel that as well.
100%. Now, if someone does want to work with you, how would they find you?
Yeah, so my practice is located in Marietta, California. The best way, I have a website, which is thehealingstudioinc.com. But I tell people too, they could either Google the Healing Studio Inc. Marietta, California, because too, I like people to get a feel of my practice so they can read like some of my Google reviews of like what people are experiencing and everything. But my website is best, and then, or they can call me. I'm always open to talking and sharing, even if they don't want to see me and they just want more information. I just love sharing anything about the work. So they can call me, and my office line is 951-723-0330. But I hope to see them at seminars.
Yes.
Just like I just saw you recently, and I love seeing you. And you know what makes me excited when I talk to you now and see where you are now? Because I remember when you started out and you were skeptical and hearing your questions to John, and I'm like, I just want him to get it too, There's being a fellow. So I am so happy that you have grown so much. And even just, when I was assisting the last series that you were at and just watching you, just to see the growth you've made and how now you have this podcast and you're sharing and how you're open and honest about, the things that you're going through too, I give you a lot of credit, and I appreciate everything you're doing.
Thank you. I think the feeling is mutual. I gleaned a lot of lessons and reminders from just hearing you speak. The main thing, following God's plan and not your own. And of course, we love John and what he started in Myofascial Release. But again, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to be on this podcast. Tell the family I said hello. I got to meet your husband, Troy, and I've heard so much good things about London. But thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Oh, thank you so much. God bless.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.